Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
And we're back to talk about the Dallas Mavericks and the Golden State Warriors. Now, obviously, the Warriors with the stranglehold on the series. They're up 3-1 over Dallas, going back to Golden State as 7-point favorites to try to take this thing home, get to their 6th NBA Finals with this regime of Kerr and Curry and Draymond and Clay and not Iguodala. Throw it out there. Count it. But we're not talking about the Warriors that much at the moment. We got to talk about the Dallas Mavericks first. I want to talk about Luka Doncic and this idea that the heliocentric offense is never going to work and it can't work around somebody like Luka. Now, the obvious answer and the simple one is that yes, it can when you have Luka, and that's basically it. Unless you have Luka, then you have no chance, right? And even with that being said, there's many people who don't believe in this idea that one person can truly run the show to the extent that Luka does, to the extent that James Harden did, amongst other players over the course of the past 5 to 7 years. You think Russell Westbrook, Damian Lillard, even Jokic and Embiid for that matter, right? You could probably argue a little bit less so with Jokic because the amount of times he moves the ball on a simple possession. Joel Embiid the same because he needs to be fed a lot of the time. So it's not like he's just bringing it up, dribble, dribble, dribble. Other people are touching it, but you get the point. Luka Doncic can be one of those guys. He is one of those guys. And the fact that they made it to where they are right now tells me all I need to know. Because unless Luka Doncic has a true number 2, or even to go as far as to say 1B, like Giannis has a Middleton, like LeBron had Anthony Davis a few years back, like Steph has Clay and Jordan Poole, like Tatum has Horford Brown Smart, right? Unless you have those, I'm not going to sit here and say Luka can't. Because James Harden being the easiest comp to this, that's the easiest one where you can say James Harden was that dude. It never worked in the playoffs. It didn't get over the hump. There's 2 differences here. And first and foremost, it's between Luka and Harden, and now what they've done showing up in the games that matter most in the playoffs. As much as I've defended Harden on this very podcast over the years, as much as I loved watching him play for a long time in his career, you can't argue against the fact that he has a damning playoff history where he doesn't show up in the biggest moments, where he doesn't get the shots and the calls that he hits all year to fall in the playoffs, to happen in the playoffs. And even with that being said, when he was at his peak and he was the heliocentric one-man show that many people don't like, that many people say can't work, the proof was in the pudding when that Houston Rockets team had the lead on the Golden State Warriors 3-2 in that Western Conference Finals, when it was probably the best Warriors team of the bunch, one of the best teams in NBA history. Now, you can argue they lost, and the heliocentrism maybe ended up killing them in the end when they couldn't make any three, because guys weren't in, they weren't in rhythm. They're not accustomed to doing what they were asked in those moments because they're so used to James doing everything, yada, yada, right? But to me, the proof was there. To me, it was proven out in that series that it can work if one thing is proper. And it's if you have another elite level talent. Sounds like a lot to ask, but I'm not talking about an elite level all around player to be your exact identical twin, right? We're not saying that Luka or James Harden need another guy who's going to average 30, 10, and 8. But what James Harden had in that Western Conference run there, where they had a true chance to beat one of the best teams ever in the Golden State Warriors, was an elite playmaker in Chris Paul and a very good defender. Chris Paul wasn't, at that point in time, the Chris Paul from the Hornets days, Chris Paul from early Clippers days, hell, even the Chris Paul we saw for the regular season here with Phoenix. But he was elite at certain things, and he was able to lift them in certain ways. Right now, looking through the Dallas Mavericks roster, they don't have anybody else who's elite at anything. You can argue that Dorian Finney-Smith is entering a near elite level defensive player. But even that's not going to quite do it when we're talking about specifically the offensive side with the heliocentrism, right? Because defensively, the one-man show on offense, in theory, doesn't make too much of a difference on the defensive side. You're obviously going to need good defensive players and a good defensive team. That's right. Everyone gets that. Jalen Brunson's very good. Finney-Smith and Bullock have been good shooters. Kleba has been pretty hit or miss in the playoffs here. Some huge three-point shooting games, some non-existent ones, right? But none of those other players send a shock, send fear into opposing defenses. You can argue that Brunson's a handful and he's a lot to deal with and he's very good. But I don't think Jalen Brunson is an elite level player. I don't think he'll be vouching for an all-star appearance very soon. Maybe he can be the end of an all-star, maybe a replacement level player, all-star roster player. But even still, it's a stretch. It's one of those players who maybe if he goes to a certain team, now he's taking 19 shots a game, he's averaging 24, he gets a nod. Okay. But if we're all being honest, and I do think Jalen Brunson is fantastic, I don't think he's a 1B. I don't think he's a true 2. If Brunson's on your team and you're expecting to be a finals contender, you need him to be a third option, right? So when it comes to the makeup of this Mavericks team, I don't know. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say who they can or cannot get in trades or in free agency or whatever to be that number 2, that 1B to Luka Doncic. But I'm saying that it's possible. And I'm saying that with Luka at the helm, I'm never going to look at their offense and say it's too Luka-centric. It's too much of a one-man show. I don't believe that to be the case because I see how he handles that compared to our more recent option in James Harden, who never came up clutch. Luka comes up clutch. He hits tough shots in all of these games. He ends up with the stats in all of these games. He's one of the best passers throughout the entire year and so far in the playoffs, right? So it's not the same as Harden, not the same as Russell Westbrook. This guy is 100% built different. And I think that even with this roster he has around him now, we'll see him in many conference finals again. But until there's, at minimum, a Chris Middleton level player, a Chris Paul, like 85% version of Chris Paul, who's kind of banged up on the Rockets level player, or I'm not saying he needs a Hall of Fame point guard on his side, right? But I'm saying another elite level player in any regard. I'm not going to criticize Luka Doncic. Now, if he starts shooting up, 4 for 20s, dropping 12 points, then we could have a conversation. But while he's here, putting up 30 points, 14 rebounds, 9 assists, and it feels regular, and it feels like he could have done a little bit more, you're not going to catch me criticizing him, the way he plays, or the way the Mavericks are running the show. I think this has been a huge success for them this season. I don't think people expected them to make it this far. They should be incredibly proud and incredibly confident that they now have strings to reach for and to pull something to make this right, for them to not just be in the Western Conference Finals once and not back again. I expect them to be back consistently, and I expect a finals appearance for Luka Doncic in the next 2 seasons. So including this one, I'm saying 3, but the next 2 seasons, I think Luka, being who he is by himself, with the Mavericks being a franchise willing to take risks, willing to try to make something happen because they know what they have at their fingertips right now, they'll be in the finals in the next 2 seasons. And we won't be saying it's Luka's one-man show mentality, heliocentrism with the 30-plus usage percentage that means anything negative. We're going to look at that and say, it don't work for most teams, but it works for Luka because that is a bad, bad man. All right, though. Warriors going to make it to the finals. Right? That is what it is. The Warriors deserve it. They're incredibly fun to watch. And that gives us the opportunity to talk more about the Warriors, at depth going into the finals rather than banking on it here where we assume they're going to take care of business in the next 1 or 2 games against Dallas and make it to the finals. If I'm wrong, I love to see it because that would be crazy. But let's be honest, this has not exactly been the closest playoffs. We've had 3 minutes and 12 seconds of crunch time basketball over this entire conference finals, East and West combined. Just over 3 minutes of crunch time basketball. That means within 5 points in the final few minutes of a game. Hasn't been very close. So that's tough. So we're not going to be talking about Dallas forever. Seems like Celtics are going to take care of business perhaps as well. So we won't be talking about the Heat forever. We'll have more chances to talk about Boston and Golden State moving forward, I assume. But for now, I'm tipping my cap here to Luka Doncic. Special player. I mean, he makes me like move on my seat. He makes me audibly gasp sometimes on plays that don't even lead to buckets because this guy boofed the shot or they couldn't catch the pass. This guy sees the court so different, and it's so incredible. I can't wait to watch him for years to come and in the finals within the next 2 years. You heard it here first. That's all we got for today. My name is Pete Kennedy. Subway Sports Talk. 2 short ones on YouTube, 1 relatively short one on your podcast apps. Hopefully you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, go to Subway Sports Talk on Apple Podcast app, leave a rating and a review and subscribe because we love seeing you guys coming back to listen. I appreciate every single one of you who turned on and hear what I have to say. Spend some time with us on a given day in a given week. It really it means so much to me. It's very cool to think anyone's out there listening and then to see people every episode just tuning in and being here over the years is special. So thank you, YouTube as well. Subscribe, hit the notifications button. You know what to do. If you haven't seen my thoughts on Bam Adebayo, go check that out in the other YouTube. If you listen on the podcast app, I assume you already heard it. If you skipped it for some reason, go back. It's a good point. Bam's got to go off. Let's go. All right. So Sports Talk. We'll talk soon. Thank you guys for listening as always. Cheers.